evening. This is BloombergQuint. Now, much has been said and explained about Budget 2022's revenue estimates for both this fiscal and the next, that's FY23. What does deserve further examination and understanding is what this budget tells us about the government's approach towards the medium to longer term tax policy and a fairer tax regime. So I'm very glad to discuss this with one of the key architects of the budget. Revenue Secretary Tarun Bajaj joins me this evening on BloombergQuint. Mr. Bajaj, thank you very much for your time. I know it's been a long and hectic week. So like I said, I promised not to ask you about whether the estimates are conservative, ultra-conservative, realist. But I do want to ask you just one question about the estimates. The underlying assumptions about the estimates, sir, for instance, nominal GDP growth or fuel tax price. Can you just talk us through, besides GDP growth, what some of the other factors may be so we can understand what might change the outcomes through the course of the next fiscal?
Thank you for having me on BloombergQuint. On the estimates for revenues, I would say that excise duty, as you know, is something which is specific, and I've explained it earlier as well. So that would go down because it goes down by almost 10,000 crores or thereabouts per month as compared to what we were getting before the prices. The excise duty was brought down by 10 rupees and 5 rupees on diesel and petrol respectively. So that is going to have an impact. And if you take away that impact, the increase in revenue that we're expecting next year from the RE of this year is 14%.
Yeah.
I should also add one thing to you that this year we are expecting a good bonanza from the capital gains tax, because there's been a lot of activity in the stock market, and I would say the figures might be about 8 or 10 times more than what we collected last year, and last year the amount was approximately about 6,000 odd crores.
Okay.
So this year, if we collect 50,000 to 60,000 crores just in capital gains, and you tracking the markets for so many years would know that this can change, and with the Fed going to increase its rates as is coming out, so you might have some flight of capital and its effect on the stock market. So we really don't know how much of money will we get from the capital markets through the capital gains tax. So that is also one of the reasons I can't expect that the growth on that will also be the same. It is quite possible that the growth may be the same, but it may not be the same. So having kept that at 14% and the GDP, which has been mentioned as 8.5 by our economist in the ministry, some of, including the RBI, for the next year have made it close to, it is less than 8%, while others, the international agencies, I think IMF has said 9%. So if it varies between 8 to 9%, and the deflator is likely to be lower, because the deflator this time is very high, as you would know, that in spite of 9.2, we are going to have 17.6. So if the deflator is low, I would still have a buoyancy of about 1.2 or thereabout in the next year. And if you look at my previous record, I have not achieved that kind of a buoyancy in many of the years. So if the revenue department has batted well in one particular year, I think we need to be very careful in saying that we'll bat equally well. I don't think the revenue buoyancy will be the same as it is in the current year. The current year is very different. It was on a low base. This time it is a high base also. So we have kept that. If we go up a little, I'll be very happy. And the last thing that I want to say there is that the expenditure also comes to us as a surprise during the year. If we achieve 50, 60,000 crores more on revenues, I think the expenditure will have that much of flexibility.
Of course, and you know, I think that has been well explained, sir, by your team and by the finance minister herself through the course of the week. So I won't dwell on that a little bit. Your excise is pegged to a fuel price. Are you working with an average expected for the next year?
The economic survey says that the fuel price should be about 70, crude price should be about $70 to $75 per barrel.
Okay.
So let us see, when we decrease the price, I think the price of the crude was about 80, 84. Right now it is about 88, 90. So let us see how does it behave. The crude will get to know once the geopolitical, the Ukraine, Russia, those issues become more clear. So we'll get to know where does it stand. So I think if we don't have any surprises on the prices going up, we should be home with the present estimates that we have on excise duty.
Okay, so these excise duty estimates are based on about roughly an average $70 price of crude through the course of next year, right?
What we would be required to do is to tinker with our excise duty. So what I would say is my estimates are based on the current excise duty, which is obviously based on a reasonable price of crude. If the crude prices really shoots up, then maybe government will take a policy. And if the prices go down, we are happy.
Okay. So also on the revenue front, and I'm moving away from taxes for just a few seconds. You've estimated, 5G spectrum auctions are expected to happen this year. What is, so far you all have resisted putting a number in there. Any broad range that you can indicate on what you expect the potential spectrum revenue will be from that?
I read a statement by the telecom secretary, and that is the horse's mouth. So he says the try recommendations are yet to come. So there is no figure that they have worked out on. But I think the figure that has been mentioned in the budget is on this kind of revenue is about 55,000 crores. And he mentioned that we should be home with that kind of a figure.
Okay, fine. All right. Just a couple of more budget specifics. There has been a comprehensive rationalization, sir, in the customs duty exemption regime, both for capital goods imports as well as for project imports. Now, what I'd like to hear from you, if possible, is your broad thinking on is most of the customs rationalization done over the course of the last 2 or 3 years as the government has pushed a Make in India agenda? And in the interim, which is the next year or two, as domestic capacity comes up to be able to aid this Make in India theme, do you expect this reduction in customs to, or in customs exemption rather, to make imports a little bit more expensive when it comes to infrastructure projects or large industrial projects?
The philosophy with which we have worked on the customs duty is that items which are manufactured within the country or can be manufactured in the country will have a customs duty which are moderate, will not have very high customs duty. So if you look at the project imports, we are saying that the customs duty there would go up to 7.5%, which is a very moderate duty, which is actually applied by most of the countries. Anecdotally, I'll just narrate you an incident that a foreign player came to us and he says, if you have a 0% customs duty on project imports, I will never set up a project here. I'll always import a project here. So this will, while it will not make our products very expensive, but at the same time give us that much of leeway that we will start manufacturing within the country, and that has an economic effect on that. So commodities that can be made within the country, we have pegged the customs duty at moderate levels, but wherever it is required that either they are not manufactured in the country, there we have reduced the customs duty, or for a specific reason, we want the customs duty to go down. For example, it helps in exports. We have done that. For example, in gems and jewelry, they have welcomed our decision to reduce the duties. It is definitely going to help in exports. Similarly, on some capital goods, we have done that. We have also done that on some fuels. We have done that on chemicals. We have also done that on electronics so that we start making. But at the same time, on products which go into making those intermediate products, if there's a raw material which is required, we have reduced the duties on that. So we have tried to calibrate that. And I'm very happy, or I should say, I'm very satisfied with the fact that we did very extensive consultations with the industry, with the departments, did crowdsourcing, and we have come up with so much on customs duty. But so far, we have not been pointed out any major faux pas that we may have done. So I think we are on the right path. As far as your question is concerned, that whether this is the end of it or not, what we have realized is that things change in the market. So on some items that we would start manufacturing, maybe we'll bring some moderate customs duties on that. On some items which are short supplied in the country, we might have to reduce duties. Then we also find that, for example, this time we have reduced duties considerably on edible oils. From 35, we brought it down to 7.5. So depending on the domestic situation of the availability of those products, we have to tinker with it. So I won't say we'll not close shop for the next budget. Something or the other will keep happening.
Yeah, there was a little bit of furor. While it's been broadly well accepted, and as part of the continuation of the Make in India policy, there are critics that call it very protectionist. But there was some furor over the umbrella situation. I think the customs duty exemption on umbrellas has gone down. So imported umbrellas will become a little bit more expensive. But I just wanted to understand, what is the net tax revenue, sir, on this? Because I think your revised estimate for FY22 is 1.89, but for FY23 is about 2.13. Do you expect these changes would have had a big impact in that 2.13?
First, let me answer your umbrella question.
Okay.
I find it very strange for a country like India, 1.3 billion. We talk of our industry, IT, and manufacturing, and we can't manufacture an umbrella. The umbrella is dumped by a neighboring country at 70, 75 rupees, and we are very happy to buy it from the Janpat market or some Sarojini Nagar market. So I think we purposely put it in the budget speech. There was no reason for us to put it in the budget speech, and it helps our MSME. So I think it should be taken in that spirit. The other question which you said, 189 to 213, is about 11 and 24. So it's about 13-14% increase in customs duty. And let me say, the customs duty as compared to the last year is getting affected by the fact that we have reduced customs duty a lot, from 35% to 7.5% on edible oil. And that is a major commodity that is imported. Similarly, we have done the same thing on pulses, and we might continue with that kind of reduction of duties. So I think the impact of all this is on the negative territory. On the positive territory, we may not have too much, maybe 3,000 odd crores and nothing more than that. So the whole idea of tinkering with the customs duty was not revenues at all. Let me tell you, there were so many items on which we took a decision. We are taking a decision on doing away with anti-dumping duty, with countervailing duties on specific products. The idea is never revenue. The idea is what is good for the country.
Sure, fair enough. Mr. Bajaj, if I could just reiterate one part of my question on this customs rationalization, if I can call it that. Look, in the interim, it is going to become more expensive, right? For infrastructure projects, for capital goods projects, because what they were able to import at maybe, a certain X price, thanks to the lower customs rate, they will now have to wait for domestic industry to arrive at that pricing. And in the interim, the customs rate would have gone up because the exemption has changed. So you see that at a time when the government is pushing very hard on, sort of capital expenditure, and you want private investment to come back in projects, etc., do you see this having a distortive effect?
I don't think it works in that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 fashion.
Okay.
The reason I'll say this is that, for example, on the project imports, we have not said that these duty rates will come from 1st of April or they'll come up immediately. In fact, what we have said in some of the project imports is that all such transactions that are concluded by 30th of September 2022 and the projects are lined up in the country by 30th of September 2023 will invite the same duty that is prevalent today. It is only after that the duty would go up to 7.5% or 5%, whatever has been mentioned in the notification. Now, what this gives is that this gives time for people who are planning to set up their projects to plan. It also gives time for the capital goods industry to see that this is what is going to happen in a year and a half. So let me set up a unit to manufacture it. So if he's manufacturing with new machineries or new products, maybe his cost also would be higher. Then the competition is always there. the overseas people are also watching what is the domestic situation. It is quite possible that they may lower their profit margins and bring it down to by 5% and make it competitive, still with a 7.5% duty. So let us see how the dynamics plays out. The whole idea is on many products, if you have seen on hearables and wearables, what we have done is we have given a road map for the next 4 years. While the duty goes down, but while the duty is up immediately, but the duty goes down over a period of time. So we don't want our people or consumers to suffer. We are giving a message to the industry that you become competitive. At the end of the day, you have to compete with the world and not only compete in India.
Okay, fair enough. My last question, just on this very specific budget, and that has to do with the promise the finance minister made that a new regulation or law, rather, a new law will come in place to replace the SEZ Act. I understand it is still work in progress and it is being designed, though I did see in the customs section of the speech that it was mentioned there that this should be a regime that will become effective September 2022. I'm just asking for your initial thoughts of what the government approach is on this. The SEZ Act as it currently stands was at one time envisaged to be able to scale exports. Unfortunately, then it became more of a tax play and in some cases a real estate play. This new law that your government is working on, will tax incentives continue to be at the center of it, or is it designed with a completely different approach in
mind? Menaka, let me tell you very frankly on this. Before the budget came out, I held many discussions with the developers and with the SEZ players or the people having units. So I realized there are 3 or 4 problems that the SEZs are facing. The first problem is that more than 50% of the units are vacant there. So these are very good infrastructure facilities that are available to us, but we have, for some reason, people feel that they don't want to come into this regime, so those places are vacant. So we really need to make a policy to be able to utilize our resources more optimally. Secondly, we found some of the SEZ units told us that when we came to the SEZ unit, we had the objective of exporting it. But things have changed. We've got competitors elsewhere in the country or elsewhere in the world. We now don't want to be in this business. We want to change. So give us that option to change. Thirdly, there were the third kind who said that we are fine to export, but I have got excess capacity, or I deal with, say, I provide winter clothes to the US and the European market. So I've got about 3 to 4 months where I can manufacture for the domestic industry. Can you do something for me? That will make me more competitive, both for the export market and for the domestic market. And the fourth was the developers themselves saying that I really need some kind of leeway where if I have one unit, it wants to go, let me go out of the SEZs, or allow the non-SEZ units to come into this. So we had some suggestions to make to Commerce, but then Commerce thought that they also need to look at it and come up with a comprehensive policy. Now, there are 2 paras on SEZs, one on Part A and one on Part B. So the Part A actually talks of the new law. So I think Commerce is working on it, and they have mentioned, I've read it in the papers, I think the minister himself said about 3 to 4 months they'll be out with a law. So I think let's wait for it as to what exactly are the parameters there, because they are the ones who will work on it. On the taxation front, as you know, a lot of taxes have already seen the sunset. And obviously, they won't come back again. So the emphasis may not be taxes in the new law. And then if the states are to be involved, obviously, taxes will not be part of it. But let's see what it is in the course. The B part that contains is only in terms of processes of customs. By September, what we are saying is, right now, the customs works on a faceless mechanism. If goods arrive in Nhava Sheva in Mumbai, we don't know where the assessment is taking place. The bill is actually sent and it goes maybe to Delhi, to Kochi, to Kolkata. It gets assessed there and comes back. So we don't interact. We are not physically present to do all these things. We work on a risk management system. So we have some parameters which throws out that this is a risky cargo. That is the only one that we check. We want to operate the same systems in SEZ. We don't want to be there physically We want to use technology to facilitate SEZ customs.
Okay, I get that. So, but just to go back to what you said in the middle of your answer, whatever this new law is that will replace the SEZ Act, well, not replace, but will probably follow the SEZ Act and will be designed by the Commerce Ministry, a tax, an enduring tax incentive of the kind that, let's say, India's software industry was able to use under the SEZ Act, or in some cases, even the jewelry or diamond processing units were able to use. That kind of enduring tax incentive is not at the center of this SEZ successor, so to speak. I ask because the policy of this government over the last few years has been to reduce the number of such direct incentives and exemptions, etc., and streamline the corporate tax policy.
So, in short, if I have to answer you, this whole SEZ policy that we have is also not WTO compliant. So, the short answer to the point that you mentioned about what the government plans is, that's a correct proposition that you're making. But let us see what does the Act say. And obviously, when they frame the Act, they'll come to us and we'll definitely give our comments on that.
All right, Mr. Bajaj, we have plenty more questions to you, especially because I did want to talk to you about the mid to long-term view on bringing some fairness back to tax policy. But I know we're short of time and you have many other commitments today. So we'll pick up that conversation with you later next week. Thanks very much for your time and thank you for speaking to Bloomberg.